Hello and welcome to the Giving Voice to Depression podcast, brought to you by Recovery.com, the best place to find mental health and addiction treatment for anyone, anywhere.
Each week, we profile a guest who shares openly about their mental health journey. They share because they understand that when people don't talk about their depression or other mental health conditions, those of us who do struggle with them can feel like we're the only ones, that there's something wrong with us and that no one understands. We understand.
I'm Terry McGuire, the creator and co-host of this podcast. You have my promise that we'll keep it real here. Depression is real, and we're not going to sugarcoat our discussions about it.
Hope is also real, and you'll get a dose of that here too. I'm Carly McCullough, a licensed social worker and educator, and Terry's daughter. We've both experienced depression and also support loved ones struggling with it. We're here to normalize talking about depression and mental health in our communities, as well as our families.
And to share real-world tested strategies that have worked for other people who have walked similar paths. Thanks for joining us. Hello, Carly.
Hi, Mom. Today we're going to be talking about depression's impact on memory. A recent article from Harvard Medical School says, quote, most people associate depression with its hallmark symptoms, which include not only sadness and apathy, but also loss of enjoyment in things that previously brought pleasure, appetite changes, and trouble sleeping.
But guess what? Memory is often a casualty as well, with research suggesting that having depression increases a person's risk for memory problems. But not all memories, because when does depression play fairly? Turns out the first to fade are recollections of happier times.
Quoting neurologist Dr. Andrew Budson from the article, quote, this unlucky phenomenon might make it more difficult to recover from depression, creating a vicious cycle. He says it's hard to remember those happy times and that you can be happy again. I don't know if that worsens depression, but it makes it harder to get out of.
It certainly does. And our guest today, Natasha Tracy, knows that reality firsthand. So rather than dive into research findings of reduced hippocampal volume and the like,
let's not.
We're going to do what we do each week. Ask someone who lives the reality what it's really like. So here is Natasha commenting on her own article on the topic, How Depression Affects Memory, Why You Can't Remember Being Happy. All right, let's start at the beginning and tell me a bit about your personal experience with depression.
Okay, so I have experienced depression since I was a child. I wasn't diagnosed at that time with any type of depression. However, my experience would suggest that, yes, I was experiencing depression even as a child. I remember experiencing it as being extremely sad and extremely lonely. And I just remember it as feeling extremely isolating. And even when my friends were happy, I couldn't necessarily be happy with them. This was not a constant state for me as a child. Then when I became a teenager, things became a little rougher. So that was when my bipolar disorder sort of started asserting itself. I would have periods of very intense depression, and they were very intense. They were suicidal depressions. And then I would have periods of more like hypomania. And hypomania is a word that not everyone knows. But what that is basically mania, but a little bit less. So the symptoms are identical, but it's a little bit less severe. And that's what we get in bipolar disorder type 2.
Okay.
So that's what I experienced as a teenager.
Natasha shares that in adulthood, she's experienced a lot of depression because while she says her bipolar meds have successfully treated her hypomania, they have not been very effective against her depression.
So what happens to me is I tend to get into very prolonged depressions. Those depressions take various shapes and forms. Sometimes they are extremely devastating and suicidal and horrific. Other times they are more moderate and just ongoing. But it's certainly a lot of depression throughout my lifetime.
Is it fairly consistent, or are there periods where you are what the world would call normal?
Sure. So when we're talking about bipolar disorder, that's called euthymia. So when you're not in a hypomanic episode or any other type of episode, yes, normal is another word for it. I know we're not supposed to say that, but it is. So I do experience periods of euthymia, but they tend to be brief.
Other than hearing your story, the reason I reached out to you was because I just loved the article you wrote about memory and depression, because while I have certainly experienced it and have heard from other people that they too have trouble accessing any recollection of having been happy, I've never really heard it spelled out the way you did. So I'd love to talk about, well, I'll start, pardon the paper noise here, but you wrote, when I'm depressed, I cannot remember what it's like not to be depressed. Although logically you can state that you've had massive chunks of your life out of depression. When you are, you don't think that's true. You literally can't remember what non-depressed feels like.
Yes, exactly. In a profound depression, it's almost like someone has erased my memory from all of the good experiences. Or to put it another way, they've taken good experiences and made them feel like they were depressed even when they weren't.
So depression not only makes the current moment sometimes unbearable, but erases memories of the good moments that would offer hope.
That's exactly right. It's like it takes chunks of your memory and just removes them. I mean, obviously, when you are depressed, you want to hang on to anything you can to say to yourself that this depression will end at some point. I know that I've experienced periods of my life where I wasn't depressed before. This depression will end just like those. And so one of the things you want to hang on to is memories of those times. But unfortunately, severe depression just robs you of that. And that's called state memory. And basically what it says is when you are depressed, you remember the depressed times. And when you're happy, you remember the happy times. So when you're happy, it's great because that cycle, that propensity for our brain to do that is a positive thing. But when we're really profoundly depressed, that particular propensity is very negative.
So how do you hang on to or access hope?
So hope is a tricky thing for me. I feel like hope is a double-edged sword. Here's why. I think everybody needs some iota of hope in order to get up in the morning, get out of bed, make yourself a cup of coffee, feed the cats, whatever. If you have no hope, you will do absolutely nothing. So you need a kernel. You need something. You need a tiny little flame inside of you that says there is hope. But for me, I have to be really careful because I feel like if I get my hopes up on something like a particular treatment, then I am absolutely destroyed when that treatment does not work. And so for me, then hope becomes a really negative thing because the hope that that treatment was going to work for me lifted me up just a tiny bit, but the crash was devastating.
I hear how double-edged it is for you, and I'm sorry. Reading more from your article, you said the thing about depression is that it dampens your emotional memory for everything except depression, that it makes you believe this sad, depressed emotional state is your life, always was your life, and always will be your life. Oh,
it's horrible. It's a trick that our brain plays on us. So I talk all the time about depression and bipolar disorder as if it were outside of me, right? I think about it that way. I think about depression and bipolar as living in my brain, which is an organ, which is in my body. And then myself, Natasha, I am beyond that, right? I am not merely my brain. I am not merely my body. I am Natasha. I'm beyond that. And it's extremely consistent. You can ask a depressed person in any country in the world, and they will tell you that is a feeling that they have because it's just the way our brain lies to us. It's almost like depression is a living thing that wants to survive. And so it wants to be there.
Yes.
That's exactly right. It's almost like it wants to be there and it wants to survive and it wants to keep you in that state. And that's not where we want to be, but it's extremely convincing to us at times.
And lots of us have the other side of that equation where when we're out of it, we feel like, oh, we're done with that. And it sounds like you don't have that.
Well, it's 100%, right? So state memory, like I said, works for good things and it works for bad things. And so, yeah, when you get out of the depression, it's like you can't remember how devastating the depression was. Your brain has sort of removed that memory for you so that you can move forward from it. So that is the reason why depression is so convincing, because we have to live with it often for weeks, months, or even in some cases, years. And so the lies are told over and over and over again. And then it's very hard to not believe them when they are all you hear.
All you hear, and they're in your own voice. It's you saying it to you, seemingly.
You know, depression knows the worst way to say something to you. It knows the way to hurt you the most because it lives in your brain. It has access to all the memories about you. So if you are really sensitive about your nose, for example, then depression can focus on that and make it seem like it's the end of the world, because that's what depression does. It works to live. And so, yes, it absolutely does that over a very broad period of time. And it is hard to ignore because it knows the best ways to attack us.
So, of the thousands of articles that you have written, and I'm grateful for them because you're a great resource, what's fascinating to me is the number of comments people make afterwards. And I'd love to read just a couple of them to you. So, Crazy Bean Writer wrote that happy memories are all but erased. All I see is never seeing the light of day again. I have to work extremely hard to conjure up memories of happiness and joyful periods in my life. I make myself sit down and find things that make me smile or made me feel good and put a small dent in the depressive state. It's like what you've written. Depression takes away all that is good and blinds everything else, making it as though sorrow is the only emotion you have.
That's exactly right. This person said that they try to get things that will bring them a little bit of happiness, a little bit of a smile, anything that might lighten their mood. And of course, I do recommend that for people. If you're depressed, you don't put yourself in further depressing situations, if at all possible, right? So you don't listen to depressing music. You listen to music that makes you smile, for example.
So one other person, Dina Marie, said that because she can't remember one single happy memory and believes when she's depressed that she's never been happy her entire life, she decided to contact family members and friends from her teenage years and ask them to send handwritten letters giving her specific happy memories that they shared. And she can pull those out when she's in a really dark place and read them. And I just think that's a genius hack.
I think that's brilliant. I think, when your memory's not working properly, count on other people. And we do that hopefully with depression in other ways as well. So for example, when you can't get to the drugstore to get your medication because you're too depressed to move, hopefully you're counting on other people to get that for you and bring that back to your home. So she's doing exactly that, which is, I know my memory's not working. Let's count on someone's who is. That's brilliant.
Past guests have also recommended putting together a box of things that remind you of times you've been happy. Photos, ticket stubs, shells from a vacation, whatever. And pulling them out during really dark times can help remind you of those erased memories. Natasha has another suggestion, one she uses herself and finds really helpful. Record yourself on camera. Nothing fancy, just use your phone. Talking to yourself about yourself.
Take some time when you're not depressed and say words to yourself, ideas to yourself, memories to yourself that will evoke the fact that you are not depressed. And there are times when you haven't been depressed, and there will be future times where you are not depressed. So for example, you can sit in front of the video recorder and just say, hello, I know you're feeling really depressed right now. That is very, very real, and I'm sorry for you. But I want you to know that I am sitting here on this very day, sitting in front of the camera, and I am talking to you, and I am doing it while I am not depressed. I promise you, I am not depressed in this moment, and you will get back to this moment and be me again.
And when you watch the video that you've recorded when you are depressed, does it help? Do you believe you?
So I think that you are the most convincing voice you have. So for example, in cognitive behavioral therapy, we talk back to the depression. That's how I would describe it. And so we use our voice to talk back to the depression, but that's in our head. And that can be more difficult to actually, stay true with, believe, because it's all happening, silently. But when you actually have a video and you can see yourself and you can hear yourself, you know what you need to hear better than anyone else.
So as we wrap up, what do you say to someone who is in a place that you know all too well, and maybe they have not yet accessed some of these tools and made themselves a recording, and they're just thinking, I've never been happy. I never will be.
Yeah. So I think there are two really key things to do when you are supremely depressed. And the first one is to separate yourself from the depression, like I said. So me, Natasha, I tend to say that I live in my mind and the depression lives in my brain. So I think of it as a mind versus brain dichotomy. So Natasha versus the depression. I tend to think of it that way. And I believe that we all need to make that separation in whatever way makes sense for us. And I believe it's critical. I believe it's critical to fight depression. And I believe it's critical for insight into depression. And then the second thing they need to do is to learn to talk back. So learn to hear the depression voice and then learn to talk back to it themselves. So for example, my brain says to me, you are very depressed. You should kill yourself. But my mind says to my depression, you are lying to me. Yes, I am depressed, but the world would not be better off without me. I know that I want to be here. For example, so your mind can talk back to your brain and say exactly what it needs to say to counter the depressive narrative that's going on.
So, Carly, one of the things that both of us took from Natasha's story and suggestions was the idea of recording a video to ourselves. And I know we did it differently, but we both did it. So you want to tell me about your experience?
Yeah, so I was really struck by Natasha talking about how we believe ourselves to be the most reliable narrators. And it's so easy when we have depression or are going through a hard time and someone else gives us advice or feedback, you can kind of be like, yeah, but you don't get it. Right. But we do trust ourselves to get it. And when we are in depression, the voice in our head is not just our own, it is also that of depression, which is telling us lies. So I really thought this was a brilliant idea. So I recorded a message to myself for the future. And I felt really different at the end than I did at the beginning of the recording.
Interesting.
And some of that's because I'm a verbal processor, but I really felt like both the act of saying these things out loud, the externalizing of the things that I was thinking and feeling for a future version of myself, and then some sense of knowing that when future me listens to it, that she's going to trust my voice.
Interesting.
And so I was like, oh, this is worth it. Like I can feel it being worth it in the present and I can hear it being worth it in the future. It was a really interesting experience. And I also, I did it while I was in the car driving. And so sort of to harken back
shoulder to shoulder.
Some of our previous episodes were, shoulder to shoulder with myself. So rather than needing to sit down and feel like I was doing something like recording a video for social media or something that feels like it's for others, this one really felt like it was for me. What was yours like?
Well, I did it video because that's what Natasha suggested. And so I was like, I will do this. I believe that I can tell when I'm getting advice from somebody who has who dips into depression and someone who sort of resides there. I think that the person who lives there understands how it can be difficult to do a video saying, hey, you're great. Don't forget how great you are. You're outstanding. You're funny. You're this, you're that. Because even if I heard it from myself in the midst of depression, I don't know that I'd believe it. So Natasha's suggestion instead was not to say, hey, you're great, but to say, you're not always depressed. That the me recording now is in a better place than the you listening now. And that's how I did it, which I found much easier to do because I didn't have to come up with or summon or maybe if I didn't even believe all the nice things I was saying in the moment. So I was able to say, hey, you or me. And I'm telling you that even though where I am right now is not perfect by any means, it is so much better than where you are. And you'll get here because you're me and I'm here. So I know that. And then I found myself like genuinely feeling compassion for future me. And I was like, hey, I didn't know we were going to have to do this ride again. I didn't know we were getting back on the roller coaster. But apparently, if you're watching this, we are. It's like one of those movies, if you're watching this.
For sure.
And then I found myself at the very end, I blew her/me a kiss and said, you've got this.
Sweet.
You've got this. We've got this. We've been here before. We get out. And I, like, even right now, I have little chills on my arm saying that. I was surprised that I was open to, I don't know, making that as genuine an experience as I'm hoping it will be on the other end. So thanks, Natasha.
This tidbit of wisdom from Natasha in so many ways, like, captures for me the magic of this podcast in that it's a piece of advice that as a social worker, I've never heard before. I've never heard this suggested. This is something that comes from folks with real world experience and is a way to live with depression in all of its shapes and forms. And I do want to share that I feel, hearing you talk about the video you recorded, there's a piece of me as your daughter that feels like, oh, good. Like now I know that we have that in our arsenal.
Interesting.
For you.
We do.
So rather than being like, have you gotten a massage lately? Or like all the things that I might throw out there if I can see that you're struggling, if we can be honest about like, hey, I have this. And it's not part of a safety plan or some of those things, but it's just part of like a preparedness and a depression preparedness plan, which is when it visits again, you have this tool, this remedy, or this potential strategy, and I also know about it. And so rather than me saying, you want to hear my thoughts on the matter, I can say, go listen to yours.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I think that feels different.
Yeah. This is one of those episodes where I hope that people who don't have depression hear it, because I just don't think that like, hey, you have so much to be grateful for would be thrown around as if it is an actual remedy. If they understood, we can't access that. It's not because we don't want to. It's not because we're negative Nellies or Eeyore, that we just sink into this dark thought pattern. We don't want to be there. I mean, it would be so cool if you felt terrible to be able to say, but I have memories of love. I have memories of kindness. I have memories of joy, and they help me through this time. Who wouldn't want that? It's like saying, no, thank you. I'm drowning, but I'm not the least bit interested in that life preserver. I mean, of course we would want access to it. It's that we don't have it. And I really appreciate how clearly Natasha and her article make that point.
So true. Depression is such a widespread thing, and to understand that it's filtering out the good stuff. And not just the good stuff in the present. The like, I can't recognize the beauty of this flower or how cute my dog looks, or this song that I love. It just isn't hitting today. It's not just filtering out those present things. It's filtering out the positive memories. Right. So it is, you're thinking not just this present moment stinks, but everything has stunk.
Right.
And so that real filter in the present when someone's trying to help you and go, but look at all you have to be grateful for. But look at how beautiful you have a healthy, happy family. That gets bounced out by depression. It doesn't get in. And it can even feel like, you think I don't know that? Like, I know that. I can't feel that. And that can almost feel like an added level of despair. Is like, you're reminding me of something I already know. So first of all, that can feel sort of like, patronizing or, redundant or whatever. But then it's like, yeah, my part of my brain knows that. And this other thing that's happening in my brain is preventing me from actually feeling and sensing that. And it's so isolating. That experience is so isolating for me.
So isolating. It completely separates you from perspective and hope. I mean, just like what other illness, right? You hurt yourself, and then while you're trying to manage and recover from that, your mind is telling you you've never been happy. I mean, it doesn't make things easier. That's for darn sure. So I'll tell you, I mean, I use the word diabolical, and there are all kinds of reasons I probably shouldn't, but I do think of depression as just, if it was made in a test tube, it's like, oh, let's take away, wait, let's take away all good memories. I mean, if we were watching this in some movie and there was some, quote, mad scientist doing this, we'd be like, oh, that's a little far. You took that a little far. I mean, really, they can't have their happy memories, but here we are.
Yeah. In Harry Potter, the series, in the books, there are these creatures called the Dementors. These creepy, swirly, cloudy gray creatures that feed on the positive emotions and memories of folks, only leaving behind the feelings of despair and emptiness. And in terms of some pop culture references, I was trying to describe depression to someone this weekend, and I realized that this image came to mind, which is like, what, do you remember the Dementors? Like, that's kind of what depression can do. And I think that the doctor who we quoted earlier, I think he would probably cringe at being compared to the Dementors. But I think that what his research is suggesting is part of that vicious cycle, that when the Dementor leaves you, if the Dementor's depression in this case, it's taken some of those happy memories with them. And maybe not permanently, but it does impede your ability to access those things. And so you and I had been exchanging strategies that we've just developed over the years too. And we're certainly not the only folks that use these, but I do remember at one point I created, you can create albums of photos on your phone. And I created I think it just says happy things. And I put in photos of sunsets and falling in love with my husband and my dog and my friends. And there have been times that I just go like, I don't know what would help. Maybe looking at the folder. Okay, these are each evidence of something good about my life that right now isn't stirring up those good feelings in me, but that's the filter of depression, not the reality. That these things do stir that in me, and I can't access that feeling right now, but I can believe that these things are good, sort of in the same way that Natasha is saying, it's in our own voice. I made this folder of things. This folder of things makes me feel good, and I know that because I made it. Years back when I was in some of the deepest, darkest depression that I've experienced, sort of really acute, one of the things that I did was I texted maybe 12 of my girlfriends, and I just said, can you send back 3 or 4 descriptors of me? Because in the same way that depression sort of stole my happy memories, it also was distorting like who I am. Am I anything? It was like stealing my life force in many ways. And so to have a little notes on my phone of like, these people know you. Like, who are people you can ask this to that you trust their answers? And then to go back and go, okay, well, so-and-so says that I'm this, this, and this. So even though the voice in my head is telling me that I'm nothing or worthless or whatever these things are, there is someone that I believe out there does know the real me. And here are some words that she uses to describe me. And that ended up being a really helpful sort of life jacket, to use the metaphor you used before. Like I was drowning and it wasn't going to totally do the trick, but it was something I could hold on to prevent myself from going under. It was water. It was a pool noodle. You know, I needed a pool noodle. I'll take any type of flotation device when I feel like I'm in that sinking place. And to have multiple is really key.
Right. And we know that at any given time, a tool in our toolkit may or may not work. Yeah. And so it's good to have a lot of them. And that's why I'm so grateful, really, to our every guest, because I've learned so many things. When I'm in it, you know, if I, as you say, you access, you know, A, B, and C, and you go, whoop, they're not working this time. Mm-hmm. So, you know, how many do I have to try before I get to that? I've got to call my doctor. But at least I recognize it as medical now. So that saves a whole lot of steps that I don't have to go down anymore like I used to. So grateful to Natasha. We will be linking to her website and to the article that we are quoting from or that we were discussing with her.
Thank you so much, Natasha, for sharing your story and your tips.
And thank you, Carly.
Thanks, Mama. We really hope that this discussion helps give some language or context to your own depression or ideas for how to support someone else in your life living with it. We invite you to check out the hundreds of episodes in our archive and to explore both the Resource Hub and treatment options on recovery.com. Depression is too dark a road to walk alone.
We'll be back next week.